Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Legacies series finale, a fantastic series finale, a beautiful series finale. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Jumping into it, geez, I'm stammering on my words. This might be the most, Vampire Diaries had a pretty happy ending, or the original's bittersweet ending. There was bittersweet endings all around. Even this is no exception, but I feel like this is the most beautifully, hope-filled one, and obviously it's very, with the character Hope, what she's always been has been Hope and miraculous in so many different regards, which we'll go into that more, but I think this is a beautiful send-off in so many different ways, but I would save that really towards the end. But obviously, in the aftermath of everything that's going on, Ethan's death, and I don't think, based on we see some pictures on the side, it doesn't seem like Ethan's the only one that died. It seemed like other people might have died as well, but maybe not, or at least people got pretty banged up. Ethan's the main death. It looked like there might have been other pictures, but maybe those were just other pictures of Ethan. But because of that, Alaric wants to shut down the school. Especially, which is heartbreaking, because Hope literally just talked to Finch about how the fact is she found her home. Like, her dad started this school because he wanted her to have a place that she can call home, and this is her home. So, and they just immediately have that conversation, and then for Alaric to be like, yeah, we're kind of shutting down the school. It's understandable where he's coming from, because it's like, right, this school started off with this mission statement of the being home for the next generation of supernaturals, where supernaturals could feel at home. They wouldn't have to feel ostracized. They wouldn't have to feel alone in this world. They find a home. But this school has been through so much, so many battles, so much death, and it's just, he doesn't want that to continue anymore. He doesn't want that to be all that this school was, so he wants it to, end here, but it's like, he believes that it'll hurt in the beginning, but eventually it'll get better and better with each day. But it's like, yeah, well, what are some people like MG? Because MG doesn't have a home to go back to. We're still unclear where things stand with his mom. Things will never be okay with him and his dad. And we see, his dad's memories were wiped about, what he really was. But he knows how his dad feels about him being a vampire and how unholy, and all that whole thing. So this is the only home him and many others have. So it's like, to lose that. And everyone else is trying to figure out for themselves, what that next stage will be. Whether the school is still together or not. The whole Ben and Jed thing was interesting to me, because it didn't cross my mind until Jed's like, oh my god, he's like, something's wrong, something feels different. And I thought that was going to happen with Caleb and MG as well, but it only focused on Jed feeling differently. But he's like, no, you and me, Ben, I feel good. My emotions haven't changed in that regard. But he's like, physically, I feel different. I'm like, what's that about? I was like, is there going to be some price for them to pay for coming back to life? And for Jed, it was. They pour wolfsbane on him, and it doesn't hurt him. And it's because he's not a wolf anymore. And then I was like, oh my god. I was like, I'm so stupid. It never crossed my mind. That's probably also why they probably struggled a little last episode too. Luckily, there were other people at play, but he probably didn't really notice it with everything going on. But it's like, yeah, he's not a wolf anymore, technically. But the reason why I felt so stupid, Tyler went through the exact same thing. Was it season 5 when the Travelers came to Mystic Falls and he put that barrier to make it so that anyone that's supernatural lost their supernaturalism upon crossing the barrier? He was a hybrid at the time. The moment he died, he went back to being human, and it reset his curse. He ended up having to reactivate his curse by killing, I want to say it wasn't her name, she was part of the Geminis, wasn't she? I want to say, wasn't her character named Penny? He ended up having to kill her to reactivate his curse. It was the only way that he was going to survive, because they were in a car accident and she wasn't going to survive, and it was the only way to make sure he would survive. So I felt so stupid. I was like, of course Jed's curse got reset. Tyler was the president for that happening. I was like, damn, I didn't even think about that last episode. But until that came up, I completely let that slip my mind about, what happened to Tyler. But I thought that was so interesting. And now for Jed being a wolf, for him, it's been a part. It's defined him. He's used that in the pack to define himself for so long, and now he wonders, right? Maybe this is someone's way of saying that this is me, because so much has changed for him recently, and now this is added to that. But it's like, right, maybe this is my way of finding out who I am without the pack and being a wolf. To be fair, he's not completely human. Like, if he ever crosses that line again, you know, and we've seen, doesn't even have to be on purpose. It can be an accident. If he accidentally kills someone, his curse will reactivate. So it's still there. But it is an interesting thing because both him and Ben now have to find out who they are without their respective curses holding them back. So Jed has decided to leave the pack in Finch's care. You know, for her, like, she initially only came to this school for Josie, but when Josie left, she found even more reason to stay, because it's like, this has become a home to me. She's even surprised how much this meant to her because of her circumstances, always feeling alone in the world, not really knowing, you know, thinking she was the only one of her kind and finding out there's others. And even if Josie isn't here, she was hoping Joe would be back, but you know, finding her way forward, even without Josie here, you know, it's like, and Jed saying, no matter which way this whole school situation falls out, that you'll be there to keep the pack together. And it's like, right, because she's now alpha, she has to challenge him to be alpha. He's like, okay, so what do you want to do? You want to wrestle? And she hugs him, and it's like, right, first one to let go, lose. I got too giddy throughout this episode. This episode was so beautiful. It just like bubbled, like it filled your heart, you know? So let's jump to everything between MG, because it was MG and mainly Hope who were trying to reach out to Alaric to change his mind, but he wouldn't. MG in particular was like, right, there are so many kids. Like, look at these stack of files. This is everyone who doesn't have a home. And it's like, if we end the school here, they won't have any place to go. But, you know, once again, for Alaric, it's like, we can't let this school's legacy essentially be dead children. And like, because there'll be more to come. But it's like, right, no matter what problems we solve, each of these people came from their respective problems, and their school was supposed to be that solution. And if you close that, then they'll have nowhere to go. They'll have to scatter to the winds. And it's like, especially, this has become a family. And Lizzie agrees with her dad with just everything that's kind of going on, that this is the right move. But MG calls them out, saying that this is just them running away. It's like, you, Alaric, are just running from your grief. Yes, what happened is terrible, but you running away won't solve anything. And the same thing for Lizzie. It's like, right, you want to run after Josie, but you're running. That's just not you running towards anything. Even she says it later on. She's not going to Josie and joining her in Europe wouldn't be running to anything. It'd be her running away from everything else. So, and I thought it was beautiful because Josie ended up sending her pendant and giving it to Hope, but Hope didn't need it anymore, so she ended up giving it to Alaric. But what that pendant represents, what it, you know, does, you know, your inner voice, that she talks about how MG has always been that voice for her, because Milton's always had that. He's always been that kind of almost a true north at the school. He's always kind of followed his own voice. He's always been that voice. And so for someone like Lizzie, who's always had 1,000 voices kind of screaming in her head, like, he is that one voice that he's always been that voice for her. And she was like, I wanted to tell you that. I'm just sad I waited till like you died, and, you know, for me to kind of fully realize and finally be ready to say that. But you are my pendant, you know, very much like Barry and Iris. You are my lightning rod type of situation. And so it's sweet, their circumstances. So she's like, right, if you're willing to fight to save the school, then I'm ready to fight too. And they kiss, and lo and behold, like, I thought it was going to be Hope who walks into the room. When it was Caroline, I jumped up. I was like, yeah, Caroline! Because she's one of those people, one of those characters that's only been in the show. Like, I want to say Caroline's only been in one other episode. I want to say it was like a couple seasons ago when she came to, I think it was during the whole Lizzie thing. I don't remember exactly, but like Lizzie went off with her for a little bit during the show. I want to say that was like one of the only times Caroline's been, because I know Jeremy's only been in this once. Bonnie's been referenced. I don't think she ever made an appearance in it. Obviously, Marcellus and Cole, this season was their first times. 2 times for Freya and Rebecca this season. So it was just kind of nice. And then knowing, like, just in this continuity that, yeah, she'd be sticking around a lot more would be interesting. But I was so excited. And then she's like, oh, you know, she's going to be around a lot more. And she's like, isn't that right, Milton? And looks at him. I was like, it's actually so cute to see them together. And MG's like, yeah, is it weird to admit that your mom kind of scares me? I'm like, that's super adorable. And then, because they had just kissed. I think that was their first kiss, too. And I was like, oh, it's so adorable. And in that moment for, like when they're, talking and everything, and then a lark walks by and MG's like, and they just stand by side each other and just kind of feeling a little awkward. I loved it. Other than that, you had the Caleb and Cleo situation that her powers are a little, like she was kind of having painter art block. She couldn't really paint. And so Caleb wanted to show her, like, right, before we kind of take this even further, I want you to know my story, but he's like, I want you to see it for yourself, because if I tell you, I'm going to have my perspective on it. It'll be my narrative bias. It'll be me telling it from my story, and I don't want to paint myself as a good guy, because Caleb's story is the only one we haven't really gotten any of like his full circumstances. So maybe in the future we would have gotten more opportunities to learn more about what his circumstances were, but even Cleo doesn't find out because she ended up seeing their future. But the thing, too, is she's a Fury, so she can change whatever future she sees. Nothing's set in stone. She has that power to change things. But with that all said and done, she was kind of scared because she saw, like, right, we have a beautiful future, but it's us going down separate roads. But despite all of that, Caleb plans, he's like, I'm not going to let some vision hold me to it. We can change it. We can make our future whatever we want it to be. And, it's like, right, he wants to be her inspiration. I love him opening up his shirt. He's like, I forgot what he was saying, but he was referencing being a dragon. He kind of took a pose. I thought that was really cute. And when they kiss and everything, the paint explodes. And, the painting being called Passion. And I thought was so interesting that she said a very specific line that she doesn't want to talk too much about the future because, for one, certain things she doesn't want, that's the thing, if you know about the future, you can change it, and certain things about the future she doesn't want to change, like Caleb's role in it. She says it seems like he's going to be a very pillar and very important future for supernaturals in general. But then she's also like, right, about my own future, and she sits at the headmaster desk, and I'm like, oh, so I guess at some point in time she inherits the school and becomes the headmaster herself at some point. I'm jumping around a little bit, but I was so certain. I was like, oh, I thought Hope was going to be the one chosen. And I feel like it would make sense. The school was kind of, the school was kind of started for her, Josie, and Lizzie. Like, obviously, Alaric and Caroline mainly started it for Lizzie and Josie. But, this was Klaus' hope to make this school for Hope. So, which, speaking of, like, she's trying to convince the school to stay open. She even has a conversation about what to do about the weapon. It's the weapon that Ken had that could kill her. It's like, well, it can't be destroyed, but she doesn't want to be the only one who knows where it is, because in case she ever loses her way again, there has to be checks and balances to the power, because if not, she is unstoppable, because there's nothing else in this. Like, now that the gods are gone and Jen wouldn't be coming after her, like, nothing else in this world could kill her. So just very much like the Michaelsons, like, nothing could kill them without the White Oak. So a very similar thing in that regard. And so she didn't want to be left unchecked, because I'm too powerful. Being the only of my kind, I shouldn't be left unchecked. It's too much power for anyone to have, especially a Michelson, as she said. It's like, yeah, your father kind of held that crown for a long time as a hybrid, as an only hybrid for a long time. And then eventually, when those numbers dwindled down to, I think the only hybrids at the time left were him and Haley. So, but then obviously his case is even special, because she's a hybrid, but she's like a regular hybrid, whereas he's an original. So it kind of puts him on a different lane when it comes to the whole hybrid thing. And her being the daughter of, not only Haley from a very specific pack of wolves, or her family line. Weren't they like the Lunars or something like that? It was something of that nature. And then her dad being not only a hybrid, but also an original, like that all played a role. Plus her grandmother being a witch and everything too. So once again, just like Klaus was in his own league, this puts Hope in her own league compared to every supernatural in this universe. But she needed help. She wanted to kind of talk to her father, so she summons Landon, who's working with Ethan, and Ethan wants to go back to life because he doesn't want to go to peace. He's like, I just started living, but the problem is with doing that, though, is he's already paid the price because he's brought 3 people back to life last episode: Jed, MG, and Caleb. And it has taken its toll. It's been a price he's paid, and it turns out that price was his humanity. He still cares, but it's dulled. I don't know whether it's a situation of being back on because he's saying being here, it feels dull. So I don't know if he goes back to limbo, it kicks back in, or is he just saying like, even being here with you is dull. He's like, I know I love you, but even my feelings, like, it's hard to feel anything, because with his humanity, it's like, he knows like, I'm supposed to love you, and I do, and I know I do, but it's just that feeling is emotions are kind of murky for him right now. And there probably be even more heavier consequences if he decided to go down the route of bringing anyone else back to life. So, and she wanted his help to find her. It's like, right, my dad's supposed to be in limbo, so if you can find him, like, I want to talk to him, because she got sent her dad's ashes, and now she's wondering, like, well, for one, she's trying to find a way to, especially with the whole, she wants to scatter his ashes, and it's like, well, if the school's going to be shut down, I don't want us to be separated again. I don't want you to be, this to kind of be like your eternal resting place, and at least if I'm here, I feel like you're never too far from me. I don't want us to ever be separated again. But she's trying to decide on where her dad would want to be buried, but Landon's like, I'm sorry, I can't do that again. And she's like, I won't want you to lose who you are just for that. But when Landon goes back, lo and behold, the rescue guy wants to help out. I was kind of hoping for that. I was like, because I was almost hoping the necromancer would be, because I thought it'd be an interesting dynamic if the necromancer was Landon's, like, yeah, I'm your shifty assistant, kind of your Igor to some extent. I thought it'd be interesting if that ended up being the case, but in actuality, I was like, oh, Ethan's going to be your rescue guy. I was like, yeah, because Ethan wants to help out. He could do his superhero thing. But in the end, because it showed like, oh man, you're able to do all this. And so he needed Ethan's help finding Klaus, but Klaus had already left town. So I was like, okay, so what are we going to do? Landon got an idea. It's like, right, I know what I can do. And so he ends up coming back and seeing Hope. And with Landon's, well, we saw these memories of Klaus had of Hope, and I was like, because at first when she wanted to see her dad, I was like, are we going to get him? I was like, are we going to get Joseph Morgan? Are we going to get Klaus? I was like, oh, maybe not, because when they started playing, because I love the whole Matrix thing, like, oh yeah, the screen is not a spoon, and so they showed all those memories. I was like, oh, is that all we're going to get? And then we got him. I was like, yes! And it's this beautiful message he sends to her. He's like, I know, like, you know, you're going to make mistakes, and you're never going to know what to do with that power, especially as a Michelson. But basically, he's saying that you might stumble along the way, but you have found your place, and he trusts and knows that she will, because she's his you are my miracle, you know? And that line, I was like, I'm glad they were able to squeeze it in one last time, and it's just continuity of, he was like, you are my peace, Hope, because that was her biggest thing, because of what Ted, the necromancer, said, that her father will never be at peace as long as she's not at peace. And this, you know, knowing that, like, right, he's like, my peace will always be with you, you know. And it's like, yes, life is going to be hard, you know, the path of an immortal, but he trusts her that she will find a way. And he's like, I will love you always and forever. And him tearing up like that, I was like, oh, the feels. I was like, but thank you for putting in that line one more time. That line resonates so much throughout the entire universe of this series, the Vampire Diaries, the originals, and Legacies. But obviously, it's very important to the Michelson family, and for it to kind of come full circle in that regard with that conversation, I thought was beautiful. And so you have Alaric making his decision. He's not going to close the school. In fact, he's going to keep it open, but not as the headmaster. And once again, I thought he was going to aim for Hope, but he's like, no, we'll keep it in the family, and Caroline's going to be the headmaster. I'm like, yeah, very befitting, because Klaus had sent her the letter and kind of set everything in motion. I mean, to be fair, there was kind of he always found Caroline very special, because she was always able to reach him like no one else was able to. I mean, which even makes me kind of think back to like the last time they were together in the originals, which is like, oh, like just like her being there for him like near the end and stuff. I thought that was beautiful, just like their final like time together. So I felt like, oh man, this is beautiful. So I'm like, okay. So her taking over the school is very like, it's all circle. It all like kind of works out in the end. So, and I love Wade sending off the spear. He's like, oh, what is this? It's like, oh, and Hope's like, yeah. He's like, oh, what is this? Some golf clubs or whatever. He's like, she's like, no, this is the only weapon that can kill me. He's like, okay, so fragile. She's like, don't worry, Wade. I'm sending it to Belgium. It's like, so I'm assuming she's leaving it in Josie's hand. Josie's always been the one to handle things the right way, right? And so Wade's almost freaked out. I'm like, oh my God, like that's kind of wild. But once again, she wants it in a position where no one else can get to it and try to use it against her, whatever challenges they must face in the future. But also, she wants to be able to put it somewhere where she doesn't have complete control and watch over it, so. But I love the whole thing between her and Landon. It's kind of, they're both on separate paths, but both being in their circumstances, her being a tri-bred, living with immortality, him being the ferryman, they could always see each other from time to time. And even though his emotions are kind of a little wonky, I think maybe everything will, you're still hopeful, fingers crossed, hoping that everything will be okay. And despite them both changing so much over the course of their stories, Landon saying, you and me being strangers, like, we won't, that's something that can never be with all the history, no matter how much we change. Us being strangers could never be. And then him being there beside her as she kind of, releases her father's ashes, So I thought that was just so beautiful all around. Alaric saying his goodbye to her, she's saying that thank you for being the second best dad, and him saying that thank you for being the third best daughter. Because he knows it's going to be rough, figuring out what he's going to do next. I was curious whether he was going to go to Belgium, but I think he's going to let Josie live her life and try not to be too overprotective or something. So he's going to figure out what's next to him, because the plan is to keep the school going and open it up to the world. Because he's like, I want to tell your stories, probably like the entire story of everything that exists in this universe when it comes to the supernaturals, everything that's covered in the Vampire Diaries, everything from the originals, everything's in this. He wants to tell what is this entire bookend all this, so that when the time comes to announce the supernaturals to the world, that you never have to hide anymore. You can be out in the open, embrace all that you are. This school kind of hid you a little bit away. Yes, it was a home, but it kind of hid you away from and had you hide kind of what you were. He kind of had them hide what they were. But it's like, I want you to be able to be open. And when that time comes, I want us to have these stories of love and loss. And because there have been so much loss that even he's experienced from those he's come to know over the course of all the series. And even Hope saying for the first time in a long time, she's finally okay. I think she resolved a lot of her issues when it came to like being alone, and that kind of now knowing her dad's at peace. Like, it all kind of works out in the end. So I thought that was beautifully done. So, and just at the end, I love Hope saying that, like, right, like, we kind of regard this world as so black and white. There are heroes and villains, but it always comes down to who tells the story. She's like, for a long time, I thought I came from a family of villains, but now I realize that's not the case. Like, she comes from a family of, yes, they are complicated, very, very complicated heroes, that nothing is very black and white, that there are shades of gray. But she's found her home here, and them welcoming the next class of supernaturals. And I think it all coming full circle like that. This school, what it meant to her, why it was built for her, Lizzie and Josie, and what it's meant to so many other supernaturals, and for her to be the one there to welcome everyone is beautiful. To think to where she started, like her reasons to come to this school had been being away from her family and having to come back here even more after after losing her dad, for things to kind of be where they are now, I think is so beautiful. So I think, you know, everyone's kind of on their journey, even Ben and Jed, but you know, they'll always have I think it's not like we're so far away from each other. We're always going to find our way because they are connected. They are family. So I think this was just a beautiful, beautiful send-off. Once again, look, I think there's less bittersweetness in this than like the originals and Vampire Diaries. Yes, there's bittersweetness all around, but I feel like it's still not as much as the other two. But I just think I'm happy. You know, once again, I don't know production-wise whether this is... I doubt this is how it was originally supposed to end, the season finale. So that's why I get the feeling like they went back and filmed something extra. So I'm so... Because once again, the god thing is just kind of like, there's those other gods. Jen has no intentions of raising them. Maybe eventually she would. But like, that's what I thought. Like, maybe in the future, the other gods would have gotten risen, and that could be a season 5 storyline. Like, I would think that at the very least, the show would get a 5th and final season. I mean, you never know. It could always run longer than, like... Because Vampire Diaries ran for 8, originals for 5, this for 4. So, to get what we got, you know... I in the beginning was like... I still was like, oh, man... Because I really wanted to see how this ended to determine whether or not I wanted another season. And yet, you could still continue from this years down the road. Be a little complicated, because, you know, all the actors would be a little bit older now. So there would be that. But there is always room, if the opportunity arises, to continue in this universe. But honestly, this is a beautiful bookend, not only to Legacies, to Vampire Diaries, to the originals. It all encompasses and it closes here in so many different regards. Everything's led up to where we are, you know, and it's like this beautiful... this legacy in its own right, what the Salvatore School represents, that legacy that remains, that this generation help bringing in this new younger generation of supernaturals. That legacy will always, you know, even if we won't get those stories, knowing that in this universe that's continuing. Like I said, you could always pick up with this at some point in time if the opportunity arises. But I think even if it doesn't, this is a beautiful bookend to all of this. And that's the like bittersweet element of it. It's just kind of crazy, because it's the same thing with like the Arrowverse. Eventually that's going to end, and it's going to be so wild when that's finally over. This too, it's like, this was 3 different shows, this universe. This is, once again, like, what, 16 total seasons of of this universe we got? 17, my math is god-awful. 17 seasons in totality, like I said. Vampire Diaries, the originals, and this. And I just thought this was, once again, a beautiful send-off all around. And it's getting me a little choked up. And it's like that thing of like, once you get to the end, it becomes that much realer, you know, that it's finally over. The moment I start getting to the end of these recordings is always when it hits me the most. Once again, when I upload it is when it really, really hits. But to everyone involved, from Vampire Diaries to the originals to the Legacies, everyone across the board who's ever been a part of the show, in front of the camera, behind the camera, everyone who's had a role in building this universe. I've never read the books, but even the books that this is kind of based on, like everything, I wish everyone the best in their future endeavors and projects. Thank you for bringing not only beautiful series and Legacies, not just a beautiful series in the Vampire Diaries and the originals, but this universe as a whole. It's been a fun, crazy ride. Legacies probably might be my now favorite amongst them. If I had to put them in order, probably Legacies or the originals and the Vampire Diaries. Granted, you can't have one without the other. It starts with the Vampire Diaries, and that's what gets us there. But I'd probably say Legacies, just because I think it's such a fun show, and what it did with the mythology that is set up by the originals and the Vampire Diaries. I think it did such a fantastic job continuing that, adding to it, molding it into something more. And I just think I'm just so grateful to been on this ride, you know? Because I wasn't there from the very, very beginning. I didn't start fully, like, watching the Vampire Diaries and stuff until maybe season 2, or I want to say season 2 was, like, because I missed parts of season 1, but I think season 2 on, I really started watching, kind of, latching on to kind of watching, try to keep up with everything, so. But, that's really all I wanted to say. To the next time we meet, goodbye, sorry, I'm getting way ahead of myself, sorry there. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.